Good evening and welcome to the GRCSU February 8th, 2024 meeting. If you'd all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's okay, it doesn't make any difference. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I'd just like to add under 8 new business D, the negotiation committee. And then we will need an executive session for negotiations and contracts.
Make the motion with amendments.
All right. Motion by Mike. All those in favor, or any discussion?
Could you repeat that, please? You said under 8?
Under 8,
T.
D, negotiation contract, or committee, I'm sorry.
B as in boy?
D as in dog.
Under 8, I only have an A on the amended.
Yeah.
I'm very confused.
Yeah. So this is the
Oh,
Quarry
that's
Valley.
Quarry Valley. Can you just go back to the other one?
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
So number
It's okay.
8D for negotiations.
Technical
Committee.
snafu.
I didn't receive her amendment.
And executive session for negotiation and contracts. And then just for clarification, under old business, A, B, and C should be crossed off. Okay? All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. General public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak this evening? All right, hearing none. Before we get into the agenda, I just want to recognize that February is School Board Appreciation Month, and we'd like to thank all GRCSU board members for their dedication and time, along with your willingness to serve your community, students, and staff. On the back table, we have for you little thank you bags, which is a small token of our appreciation for all that you do. So thank you all, and if you see a school board member out and about during the month of February or any time, be sure to thank them for their time. All right, consent agenda, approval of minutes. A motion would be in order to approve the minutes of January 2nd.
So moved.
Motion by Linda. Any discussion?
Just on number 10, general public comments, it's not a sentence. Our impression is that there is not invitation, not an invitation, maybe?
The first sentence?
Yeah. Not an invitation. Other than
There's not invitation. There's not a invitation. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Approval of warrants. You receive your warrants via GRCSU email. All questions or comments should be directed to Lewis. A motion will be in order for approval of warrants.
Make the motion.
Motion by Mike. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Someone's trying to get
I got him.
Thank you.
Go Tim. This is out of order, isn't it?
Do you want to go over your superintendent's report, Chris?
Yeah, it
It's
should be.
not on here, so. Superintendent's report, Chris.
Thanks. Just a few items. I know that this is a very volatile budget season, as we're all aware, just the things going around with Act 127, particularly around the 5% cap. I know that there is another hearing today, or another meeting in Ways and Means Committee. So I think they're just, we're kind of waiting to see what happens with each of our budgets. I know that's, as soon as we have information, we will communicate that to the board as well as to members of the public if necessary. I do want to, as Lisa said, this is board member recognition month, the month of February. It's interesting that you choose a month of February, which I think is kind of the most difficult month. It's right before, I think March or April would be probably more appropriate, right after we get through budget season, through tough budget cycle. But I do want to, on behalf of central office, our building admins, and our staff, just say thank you to our board members for all of your hard work over the course of the year. I think people sometimes don't quite realize the amount of time and effort that the boards put in. It's not just to show up at a meeting one night a month, that there's a lot of work done behind the scenes around discussion with staff or the admins, or particularly around budget season. A lot of careful considerations. So, like I said, I just want to say thank you to our board for their being fiscally responsible and continue to put students first. We do appreciate it. So, and while we recognize over the month, like I said, we do appreciate our board members year round. There is a legislative update in here. It's very lengthy. This will be something that obviously will be updated on a daily basis as bills start to come out of the committee and move on to the House floor or Senate floor. We do know that there are a lot of bills that are proposed that we are not necessarily responding to as of yet, because we don't know if they'll make it out of committee or if they'll, what the next steps are. But as a bill makes it out of committee and moves into the House or Senate floor, it may have serious consideration. That's something which we will just keep the board members abreast in terms of what the potential impact that piece of legislation may have on our schools, as well as for our students. So, as I said, but if there at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Lewis. We're every day we're meeting, discussing about impacts and what's going on. I know that our regional superintendents group, is meeting regularly now to just discuss the impacts around this. Like I said, this is a very unique budget cycle. Each year is, but this one more so than others, and particularly as we know that it's not a one-year blip. We are going to have to really look at as we finish up this budget, and hopefully our budgets will pass in March. As we look at next year, we're going to have to just really do some hard digging into to our budgets and making sure that our students still receive high quality education around that. So just we have a lot of work ahead of us around this. So, but like I said, the rest of this is just more for information purposes. I do want to also make note of Fast Bridge assessments. We have completed our mid-year. We will have reports at the local board levels in March around mid-year assessments, as well as just what we're seeing around growth, as well as our admins will provide next steps. But they're currently working with their staff on this, kind of assessing, the growth, some of the strengths they've seen, some of the positives, some of the negatives, and what adjustments they're making to curriculum as well as to instruction in their classrooms.
Great.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Not a question, but just a comment. I just want to comment on the legislative update and just say that this is pretty thorough and in-depth, and just appreciate it, because a lot of these bills in here that, it's a lot to keep track of, and so I really appreciate the update, and it's good to know that you're at least keeping an eye on a lot of this stuff.
Right.
There are a lot of interesting bills that come through, and I think that's I do credit our executive director of the VSA, Jeff Francis, and I think our superintendents. We have a lot of discussion around bills. And I think I'll just say this publicly. I think one of our concerns, as we see pieces of legislation come to the House, is that we wish sometimes our representatives, our senators, would reach out to us more before they put this piece of legislation together. I think there is one piece of legislation that came through. I'm not going to necessarily say which one it is, but at our VSA all-members meeting, I think unanimously we all said it was not a great idea, and we all kind of surprised because there was not one superintendent who was contacted about this piece of legislation that had a profound impact on our districts and our schools. And so we just would hope that we would have more communication. We are scheduling a meeting, our regional superintendents group, March 18th, to meet with our representatives, our senators. So if there are items that you'd like us to discuss, please just send me an email and I can put that on the agenda as well. All right, so.
It would be nice if, we have invited, since we have two Rutland County senators that serve on the Education Committee, and they have been invited to board meetings, but they don't attend, so.
Yeah. So if you like, I'd be more than happy to reach out and invite them to our March meeting. to
Sure, I think
discuss.
that, yeah.
Yep. So you went at the March GRCSU, or?
March or April, do you think?
I think they might have a break in March. It depends when our meeting is.
Okay, we're
Usually that's
gonna,
crossover.
yeah, we're gonna talk about that a little bit later here, about changing that. Okay,
And I would suggest we reach out to the entire committee, not just the ones that are, I understand how we vote them in, but
Right.
education's on a state level here, so I'd like to talk to the entire committee, not just the Rutland County ones.
yeah,
And just my perspective is the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee sometimes have two completely different perspectives on pieces of legislation.
Very different.
So it is interesting.
and the other upside is if you don't have the opportunity during the day, like today, they came on at like 1 o'clock and then again at 3:05, the House, when they were talking about things. They are all recorded on YouTube, so you can go back and watch if, like, today is probably a good day to go back and rewatch it because there was a lot of stuff discussed that, as one lady said, or one representative said, she goes, like, I just need to process it for a moment, so, but there was a lot of stuff about the cap and funding today, so, but that is a bonus that you can go back on YouTube and listen, so, all right. Lisa Matson.
Good evening, everyone. I would just like to echo Chris and express our appreciation for all of our board members on all of our boards and all of the work that you do all year long. As Chris said, we know it is far beyond one meeting a month, and thank you for your involvement and your support of our schools. Just to highlight a couple of things in my written report, the MTSS work, we had a mid-year checkpoint at this point and brought our MTSS team together at West Rutland School and spent some time going through our forms, our processes, hearing from schools, sharing highlights, sharing areas where we can continue to refine the process, along with new things. So like our secondary intervention is new this year. We're working on the SEL pieces new this year. And check-ins on how those were going. So that was a great mid-year connection, and we'll continue to work on the pieces that we identified during that time. We also, curriculum work, all the updates from both Jen and myself are in the curriculum and assessment section of my report. We've been working on getting all of the ELA pieces up and running, developing templates for the curriculum sequence map and the unit plans, looking at some of the work that exists in some of our schools so far, and pulling together what the teachers need to dive in. So they have started with that work, and we'll be reconnecting with that group in a couple weeks for a check-in. And then looking at Cognia, there's a lot going on. Obviously, it's our second year of implementing that tool for the state assessment, the VICCAP assessment. And so they released the formative assessment resources and materials, which are like practice tests kind of, and they're shorter chunks of content that are directly related to curriculum standards. And so we're in the process of creating a crosswalk document for our teachers to line that up with our priority indicators and our curriculum, so they can see based on what they're teaching, which one of the formative assessments would be the most appropriate for them to administer to their students. And we've also developed training materials and done training with our administrators and with all of our school test coordinators to help support them in making sure that everything was set up in the program and that they know how to use it and can support their teachers. And now school principals are rolling that out to their staff, and we're supporting their training of their staff as well. We've just completed, as Chris mentioned, the mid-year FastBridge just wrapped up on Friday. And we're working on a couple makeups to finish up those, and we'll be doing all of the supporting the principals with their mid-year analysis for those. And then getting ready for the end of year VICAP cognitive assessment, which is just year 2 of that test for all of us. And so making sure that everybody's really familiar with it. There are a few small changes, so just making sure everybody knows what those are and they're prepared, because that will be here before we know it in just a couple months. So we want to make sure the window opens in the middle of March. We want to make sure everybody's ready to go. And we started training with our literacy interventionists on the UFly phonics program for them to use as an intervention with small groups or one-on-one with students. And they had been asking for that training, and I think they're really excited to have that opportunity, and we're excited to provide it for them because it's there's a really nice scope and sequence in there. You can really determine where you need to start with a student and can accelerate intervention for them based on that scope with a program that spirals really nicely. So we're excited to start to add that to our intervention repertoire SU-wide. And other than that, I would just, if there's any questions or anything that I can offer for folks, please let me know.
I have a question, Lisa. Being that you are doing training now with the interventionist for UFly, does that mean that the UFly pilot is going well?
So far it is going well. We have some really promising results from a lot of classrooms across the Supervisory Union, and also some really promising data on the weekly progress monitoring assessments that the teachers are giving. We were waiting for the FastBridge window to close this past Friday so that we could look at the difference, and that is a process that's just starting this week. So we'll take a look at that and see how the data stacks up big picture. But anecdotally, there's a lot of promising information coming out of the program. You know, we have some variety too. Some teachers who have stronger phonics backgrounds, of course, it's a lot easier for them to implement the program. So we've been collecting information on that and thinking about how we can better train and support teachers who don't have a strong phonics background in implementing it, although the program is really designed to provide a lot of scaffolding and professional development for them already. And I'm almost finished. I've made it to almost every classroom for a mid-year observation of the program in action. I have just a couple more to go, and I'll have been able to see all the classrooms, which has been great because it picked up a lot of really helpful information, both for how to support teachers and also how to help them share their practices across schools and some of the great things that they're doing with the program.
Great. And then I was just curious, I know that we've been talking about the math audit for a while. Is there a timeline for when you expect to be finished with the curriculum resource review?
So the math audit is underway. The consultants have been out in all of our schools, and I think that this week should be the final week that they have school-based observations. They have a few virtual focus groups, and one's going on right now, and a couple individual principals that they're going to follow up with for some interviews. And then they'll be coming back to us with a presentation of findings at some point. You know, it takes them several weeks after they finish that to gather that all together. But they worked on our data already, and they've been working through things. So I'm hopeful that within about a month after they wrap up, we should hear back from them.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Lisa?
Yeah, I had a question about the VT cap assessment. I know this being our second year, last year there were some issues with that. Do you think there's going to be any issues this year? Have they worked through those technical issues that was causing problems?
Magic 8 Ball says, the state has not really offered us a lot of information on things that have been happening on the back end with VidCap this year. There was one training session that I attended, and several of our principals also attended just a few weeks ago, where they highlighted the changes for us. They did make changes with rostering, and so now last year the state rostered the test, and we were responsible for verifying the rosters, and this year that has been pushed onto our tech departments. to do the rostering for the test, and Greg and Milt have already been working on that and getting everything into the system and working with the school coordinators to try and cross-reference. So, I'm hopeful that similar, it was like that with SBAC, right? When we first rolled it out, it took them a little bit to kind of work out the kinks, and I'm hopeful that it will be smoother than it was last year. But we really haven't had any additional information from the AOE about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Moving on to personnel, contract information, support staff. Jennifer Williams, CODA, $30 an hour for special education. A motion would be in order to approve the contract.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Resignations. We have Kimberly Hutchinson, occupational therapist, resigning effective 1/19/2024. Vincent Covino, tech, resigning effective 1/11/2024. Elaine Coyle, substitute coordinator, HR clerk, resigning effective 2/2/24. And Heidi Brothers, Wells Village, Middletown Springs, special ed teacher, resigning effective 1/31/24. A motion would be in order to accept the resignations.
So moved.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Do we intend to replace the sub-coordinator position?
Yeah, it's on this.
Yes, we have it posted. And Louis, do you want to kind of talk? It's it impacts.
Currently, it's posted, currently in interview process. Hopefully we'll have a candidate for the next meeting.
Okay. And Greg, what about you losing Vinnie? You have someone, I know before it was hard when you were looking. What do you think your possibilities or options are there?
Yeah, I had a job posted for a little while, but from last year. But I'm gonna rewrite it, repost it now. I've been approving some overtime for the technicians that were covering Fulton, and we've all been kind of chipping in. We have some work to do on the February break, and I want to kind of get a grip of things down there. After that, I'll have a better understanding of what's out there, what I'm going to bring to the board, and what my strategy is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and you have in your packet open positions for information. Moving on to finance, Lewis.
Can I ask a question about the
sure.
open positions? So I guess this is probably for Bill. Are we still looking for an occupational therapist even though we just hired a CODA? Or maybe Chris, you know?
That would be Bill. Let me just, may have stepped away. Quick text.
We could come back to that. We'll
Yeah.
just pop over. Lewis?
Fine.
Okay, so a couple things tonight. In the packet was some information about a trash removal bid. I know in the last few, not so much recently, but over the summer, I believe, in the fall, there were some questions regarding increases in trash removal over the last year or two, and a request to go out to bid. I know when we went back out to bid in 2018, after we had merged, we were really looking for a unified contract for all of our schools. And there was only one provider that offered to service all of our schools at the same, within our area. So I did go back out to bid, and I did give the option for vendors to either provide service to all of our schools or just one or two. They could choose. I sent the specs to 4 different companies. I only received one bid, and it is from our current vendor. I did provide the information on the bid, as well as a bunch of information in the packet. I have met with him twice since we received the bids to discuss sort of the concerns and to identify why we're seeing prices and increases in prices. And there's really two reasons. One, so Casella's is just the pickup provider, and then they have to then send that stuff to a solid waste company. And so they're seeing increases on their end, which are then being passed along. But the other piece, which is really impacting most of our schools' price increases, is the compost law, which was not in place in 2018 when we first went out to bid. We started that probably about 2 years ago. And that is an added cost that we're seeing in all of our bills. And that's about $30, I think it's like $31 for a 32-gallon tote for each pickup. So if you have 5 totes, you're talking about $150 every time they pick up. And those are the smaller totes, and because of the weight, they can't really be too big. So that is a new expense that was added a couple years ago. The way to offset that cost would be for us to do outreach to the communities to see if there's any farmers or any other companies that have use for that compost that are willing to pick it up at no additional cost. If they could benefit from it, we can give it to them for free, but it saves us having to pay Casella's to pick it up. This is sort of just an FYI. We're already doing business with Casella's. They're the only bidder. We're going to continue doing business. This is really our only option at this point. So if there's any questions, I could answer those.
One could say this is an unexpected cost increase from a piece of legislation that didn't take into account the burden on taxpayers, but.
Or businesses. Or businesses.
Just thought.
And when they put the law in place, there really wasn't the capacity for people to be able to handle that compost. And so the distance that they have to drive to get rid of it does impact the cost.
And they're fine with, if we find someone else to do it for a cheaper cost, they're fine without doing the compost part with
Correct,
our
yeah.
board.
And I think I've said, what I put in the packet too is like during the summer, if we have less students in our buildings or during breaks, we can call them and just tell them to not come pick up, and that would result in cost savings as well. And so,
Do we do any composting on site for any of the schools?
some schools may, if they have community gardens. I'm not sure exactly which
They'd be
ones do.
difficult. That's
I'm not saying a lot, I'm just saying maybe as the teaching,
So I think.
not gonna save us that much
somewhere-
money for that component.
I do believe with some of the nutrition, like the healthy foods from A to Z, that they'll use some of the compost. They'll discuss compost, but I think just the volume that we're producing, I think we would, I think it would be too much for what we really need. So for a small little community garden would just be way too much.
Do we know how much, like a idea of how much each school?
I don't have
It's-
that data
okay.
here, no.
I mean, because most of the farms that in our communities we're gonna, if we reached out, are kind of small. So, I mean, if it's, just to have an idea for a talking point to reach out. Because I know at one point, Proctor Elementary, someone took it, but it was, at that time, it wasn't as much, so I don't know. So maybe if you could send us just an idea what that is, so we could just have talking points if we're gonna reach out to people.
Okay, I'll try to get that information.
Otherwise, it's hard to have that conversation,
Jessica Grabowski, Monique, she's a farmer, so she might know somebody, so we might visit
Yeah.
her.
Okay.
Why do they charge so much for Proctor?
It all has to do with
Transportation.
location, where they're bringing the product. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you notice, actually Wells is fairly cheap compared to the other ones, and it's because their trash is going to Manchester, and the Manchester Solid Waste Division costs are a lot cheaper than the Rutland County.
Thanks.
I thought it might be because they're separating their compost.
No.
They're not.
I'm not sure what,
Yeah.
I think many of the schools are separating compost, but the reason for their price difference is really, because actually the compost is just that separate column. The other prices are non-compost prices.
Gotcha.
Bury the trash in the woods.
Have your own compost.
I just wanted to mention,
School compost.
I know that
Burning trash illegal?
there is a person that just collects compost, and I don't know what he charges for a school, but it could be worthwhile, I think, looking into. He comes and picks it up at my house every other week, and it's a pretty low monthly fee.
Okay.
It takes a lot. It's called Music Mountain Compost.
Music Mountain.
Compost.
We have a ton. We
But
feed
I agree,
350, I mean,
but-
just Rutland Town's
But he
353
uses
kids.
it. He has a big truck and he uses it, and it might be something he'd be interested in. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
The other thing I'll just mention, so just an update on like budgets and town reports. So all of the information went to the printers for the annual reports for Corey Valley and Well Springs. So we're hoping to have those booklets in the next week or so, a week or two. And after that point, we'll disperse those to the area towns, usually in post office, town office, schools, and libraries. As well, all the information for Rutland Town and IRA went to the town clerks, and those will be in your town reports whenever those go out. The town's responsible for those, so we don't really have a part in that. We are in the process on working on our PowerPoints and PEG TV presentations. The goal is to have that done by the end of the week. We were sort of holding off on that until we find out what happens with the legislation, so that we know if we should adjust our presentations at all for PEG TV. So hopefully later this week, we should have a definitive direction on that, and we can get those to PEG TV. And then I'm not sure exactly what their schedule is, but the goal is to get those on there as soon as possible. The last piece is the brochures. I've been working on those over the last couple of days. I have changed the presentation for the Corey Valley one, and I wanted to get feedback from the other boards as to whether you wanted to move in the same direction or keep what you currently have. So last year, we did one single piece of paper, and we did it as a trifold. So it was just like this, and it was mailed out. So we, in essence, had just one page front and back. This year, we're going with 2 pages. So it's 2 sheets of paper, and they're just being just a bifold. So on the outside, you have the mailing information, and then we have some, just like a cover with some pictures and some town meeting information. And then on the inside, we're able to fit a lot more information. Less pictures, more information this year with all the stuff going on with CLAs and Act 127 and the yield. We thought it would be more important to have data rather than pictures. There are pictures on the town, in the annual booklets, as well as in our presentations that are on PEG TV. But we have, like for Corey Valley, I have a page on budget information, and then a whole page on state data information, and then another page on like the budget charts and information. So we can fit a lot more in this method. I don't need an answer tonight. If you wanted to just discuss it with your board and get back to me, we do have a tight deadline. Our goal is to get it to the printer by the end of this week, very early next week. So if you can just let me know as soon as possible whether you want to stay with the trifold or go with the bifold.
I love the bifold. I think it gives a lot more information, and I think it's being very responsive to the few comments that we've had from the public as well as board members, trying to explain the terms a little bit more and just get more information out there. So I really like it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, definitely love it.
Okay. And for Corey Valley, that if those of you that have seen this, if you do have any comments on specific information that's in it, just get back to me as soon as possible, any edits that you think need to happen. And then once I have the draft for Rutland Town and Will Springs, I'll send it to the board chairs. And then if you can just get back to me as soon as possible with that. It's going to be what I'm working on over the next couple of days. So maybe tomorrow or maybe Thursday.
Thank you.
George?
We had talked about coming up with some kind of a glossary of tax terms and things like that, and I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the state already has that, and I shared a link with you and Chris and
Yes.
Lisa and Eric today. And I don't know if you want to put that link on there somehow.
So I'll play around with it a little more. I did go on the link, and once you clicked on the link, it brought you to a state website, but it didn't bring you right to the glossary. And I spent a couple minutes on it, couldn't actually find the glossary, so I do need to look at it a little bit more and see if there's a better link.
And George, now that Lewis knows how to
Make
do
sure I
QR
sent you the right
codes,
one.
I taught Lewis how to do QR codes. It was a 5-second tutorial. So he's an expert, so we could easily put like a QR code once we have that right link. So I think that'd be a good thing to throw on there.
So we do have a QR code on here. We've also added it to our annual booklets, as well as our PEG TV presentations. And this QR code will bring you right to our website with all the budget information. So one option is we could put another QR code bringing you to the state website, or we can put the state information on our website and just have the one QR code that'll bring them to the to our website, which has more information on everything.
That's probably a better idea, considering that it might end up in the recycle bin. Just
Amanda?
Hi, sorry, this goes back to the trash. I think my hand quietly went up. Just wondering do we have to keep the contract within all of the schools in RSU, or is the contract interchangeable within our schools? I'm just wondering, like, if there's some schools listed there that might be able to find something better than Casella, where others might have to stay with Casella. Does the contract specifically say that we have to do it as a whole SU, or?
So we're not currently under contract. Our contract's expired. It was a 3-year contract, and we've sort of just been renewing without a contract. When I went back out to bid, Casella's was the only one that provided a bid. And the bidders had the opportunity to bid on one school or all 8.
Thank you.
A lot of the smaller vendors, what Casella's is telling me is that a lot of the smaller vendors don't have the capacity for schools, and they are really trying to keep their business local. And so he's been approached, or they've been approached by many smaller vendors to take over their business.
Okay, thank you.
A lot easier to read.
Yeah.
More real, I
George,
think.
where's the link? Is it to the AOE? Is it to the?
It's the Vermont Department Agency of Administration, and they have a lot of
Thank you.
different pages. This is the one for the Department of Taxes,
Okay.
and it does provide a glossary, and it's all state-specific, so
Right.
there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and come up with our
Right, I
own.
think that was the issue, just like it didn't take you right there, so sometimes when people can't get right there, then they lose interest, so.
I'll look into that as
Yeah,
well.
but if we can figure it out, and I
Working
think
now.
what Louis said maybe is a better idea, to bring us to our website and then go.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive list, I mean, A
Yeah.
through Z,
So-
and I don't even know, like, I'm just kind of flipping through it, some of the definitions might be outdated, especially with Act 127 coming into play, but, you know, the state definitions would, you know, I agree, they would be valuable for folks who, you know, aren't really up to speed on the acronyms and
Yeah.
what it means.
So if we can do something that links it maybe to our site and back, that would be great. I'm sure Louis will figure it out. This was a 5-second conversation, and look what he came up with. It's amazing.
Did they, on the state, is there like, did they do an impact study on 127? Graphically, that shows how it affects districts or regions? And is that something that we could, off the cuff, get before we get these legislators in here? At least how it impacts us? I mean, is there anywhere else
Well,
the
I
state
mean,
said
I
it
think
shows
they're
you-
still
That's what they're
trying
talking
to
about
read,
today.
they're looking at transition models, and so they're redoing parts of Act 127 currently, so I think
Redoing the
that's.
math.
I think they did.
Yeah.
They just sent us an email today, and there is a Act 127 tax rate discount by district.
So it gives you enough, but what we received the same thing, but they warned us that still has to go be approved in the House, the Senate, by the governor, so still is a long way to go. It's just more for us just to, for our own reference, that this is what they're proposing to us to
That's
do,
what
so-
they're talking about
Correct, so
today.
Yeah.
hopefully
And we
we'll,
did get an update at 5 something this
Yeah.
evening, so.
But
They're
if
not,
you,
it's not done yet.
No.
And we'll
And
talk
they're-
about that tonight.
And they're gonna talk about it again tomorrow, so,
Yep.
Well, it'd be nice to have that as we go in to talk to them, but
Yeah.
here's the impact on us. Where are the advantages that don't see anywhere? I mean, we still need a basket of money in the state for education. Who are you pulling
$30
it
million.
from? Who are you pulling it from?
Us, that's what they
Yeah.
said today. 3 cents added on to everybody, that's what he said.
Let them eat cake.
All right, Tina, you had a question for Bill?
Oh, yes, Bill. Are you back?
I'm back and I heard the question. I apologize, Tina, I wish I had a better excuse, but here I am. So as far as the OT goes, we've actually got a pretty good plan in place. I want to be careful not to disclose other people's plans, but we feel we will have work to keep the quota for next year. And we've already, because we've advertised for the OT early, we've got a candidate, we actually are going to offer the job to for next year. And so our plan is to have quota support plus 2 OTs next year.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, moving on to new business, March meeting date. So because we meet before everyone else, we need to change our March meeting date for reorganization. So our date would be the 12th, right?
We meet the 12th.
Right.
So I think 19th would be the next.
And we
one.
don't, I think all the local boards need to meet first.
Right, so that's why we're changing, yeah.
Oh, no, so that's what I was saying. I was thinking the next week, the third week might work better because we all meet on the second week.
Right, so,
The 19th, maybe?
right, that's what we were hoping, the 19th. So,
GRCSU or?
for just GRCSU,
19th.
everyone else will have met, so,
That's President's Day, just so
No,
you know.
March.
March 19th.
Wrong month.
Yeah.
19th.
So it would be the third Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. So March 19th at 6 PM. Great. And then one of the things that we had talked about for the March meeting, we'll meet here, and then we could determine how we wanted to move forward, like visiting schools, like in April, if we can visit Rutland Town or whatever. So we could get out and people wanted to see other schools. Okay? All right, you have the GRCSU calendar in front of you.
Yeah, this is a regional calendar. It is set around Stafford. So the regional superintendents meet and set this, and then we obviously put in our in-service days. Nothing has changed from this year's calendar. So the only thing I guess really is different is we have a GRCSU workday that's typically for our staff that happens at the beginning of the year. And I know that Lisa had a lot of feedback after the in-service that it may be a little more effective to move that in-service day to the day before school, so teachers have a little more opportunity to get their rooms set up. I know as a former high school teacher, it took me all but 5 minutes to get my room set up, but I know our elementary school teachers do a great job and really creating some nice learning environments for the students to walk into, and it takes them a little more time. So we felt that might be a little bit better use of that work day as opposed to prior to that. So the association was happy with that shift as well, so.
Okay, any questions about it? All right, Vision and Mission
So
Committee,
we just need a motion to.
oh, a motion to approve the calendar. Motion by Mike, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Vision and Mission Committee update. Tina?
So we met earlier this month, the committee, and I think you attended as well. Thank you. So we came up with a plan of how we wanted to include stakeholders and when we are going to meet next. And we have our next meeting tomorrow evening at West Rutland School, and we'll be starting the process of identifying what we want in a vision statement, where we were, what we have now, and where we're going. So that's going to be the theme of tomorrow, and I will report back next month.
Great. And then negotiation committee. So when we get ready to reorganize on everybody's reorg handout, it has 2 lines for negotiation committee members. We've always had an alternate at Quarry Valley, and kind of after discussing it, the thought was if there's no objections that each district would have 3 members to negotiations, because there's really no advantage to being the alternate if you're only showing up when someone else is ill. You're just playing catch up all the time, and that way it ensures that every district has at least 1 or 2 people there. So when we reorg, if there's no objection, that at your local meetings, everyone would appoint 3 members to negotiations. Any concern about that? A while ago, I was speaking to Eric before the meeting. When we first merged, we had more, when Clarence was our leader, we had more members than on negotiation. So it just seems like at Quarry Valley, there's a level, we try to have a level of equity like when we come here. We have someone from Polteny, West Rutland, and Proctor. And I know that we're a little unique in that situation. But so everyone kind of has a voice. But it also just seems like it's nice if more people want to be involved in negotiations, and not knowing exactly how we're going to be meeting and like that. Sometimes people have conflicts, so it just makes it nicer that you have you would probably have at least 2 people, I would say. But even 3 doesn't seem like it's overwhelming to have from each district.
Yeah, I agree. I think, from a Wellsprings perspective, we had some, school board members who had been doing this for years, and then someone like myself comes along and has no idea what's in store for them with negotiations. So I think having another person who you can also integrate into the negotiations, because it's not like a typical committee. So, and
Right.
it allows just for so I agree.
Right. Tina?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Right. Great. Thank you. All right, moving on to policy. So we have F2, search and seizure of students and property by school personnel, second read. A motion would be in order.
So moved.
Motion by Eric. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
The next policies are all. The next policies are. Is that me?
No.
So, Jeff, can you mute it, because I think we're getting a little feedback on your mic. That's okay.
The next policies are all first reads. E9, animals on school grounds. E14, fiscal management, general financial accountability. E15, capitalization of assets. F3, GRCSU, driver's education for resident students in tuition school districts. And H5, Title I, Part A, parent and family engagement. A motion would be in order to move on as second reads.
So moved.
Discussion.
I have a question about the driver ed, the amount 550. Is that reasonable? Based on what I've seen as the cost in this area to get a driver's ed?
I have no idea what a private driver's ed costs because,
It does not cover the full amount.
yeah,
The full
No.
amount that I've seen has been about 750 to 800.
yeah.
So the idea behind that was when we first implemented this policy, the idea was to offset that cost back then. And so this year was increased just because of the rising cost. But I think we don't have to actually reimburse anything. So I just think it was a gesture for schools that don't have a secondary, that tuition out to secondary schools, that they could find a driver's ed program and at least get some sort of reimbursement for the cost.
So we're not obligated to foot the whole thing then,
No?
just to help, okay.
We're not obligated to help either. I wanted to make some notes on F3 as well. That first paragraph, there's some formatting and grammar.
We were not gonna bring that up.
So the board recognizes that driver's education, there should be an apostrophe between the R and the S. And then there should be a semicolon after drive in the second line.
Do you have that on a piece of paper to send to Eric, or?
I think he's writing it right now.
Okay.
And then a comma after therefore. And then another apostrophe in drivers on the third line.
Does it need to be caps because it's a course of study?
No, because it's not a specific course of study.
Thank you.
So we're gonna leave the grammatical part just as a submission rather than bringing it up here.
In our policies, we need to, well, it was just there.
It's grammatical, it doesn't change the,
I think it had been correct before.
and it should be submitted to whoever.
I think it's fine. I mean, is that all the
Yeah.
changes?
Okay. All right, and I just had a couple questions on E9, on the second page, where it says, pet dogs are not allowed outdoors on campus grounds while school is in session or during school events. I was curious why, I guess I'd like it to say specifically athletic events also in there.
Yeah, so we had a long discussion on this, and I think, as like a GRCSU policy, some of our schools, athletic events aren't on school property.
Right.
So not all schools, so that's why it says campus grounds.
Yeah,
And then, the other part to that, if any other school event. So that's why that's there, is it kind of, it's not specific to anyone. It just, the idea is that it, I don't know if I'm explaining it well enough.
well, I guess it can't say athletic events, school and athletic
You
events.
could say during school events, including athletics or something like that. I don't think that would hurt, because it still does, it is qualified by on-campus grounds in
Well,
that same sentence.
I mean, my thought is, like school event is anything that's, school sponsored, which would be an athletic event or.
It is included in that.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
it's not that specific and spelled out, athletic events.
yeah, I guess I'm just wondering what's the hesitation in that? Because that's really
It's just
the,
that we wanted to encompass more than sports.
right, that's what I'm saying, why can't it say during school and athletic events or athletic events? I don't know, I just,
You could say school,
Sponsored.
for example, athletic events, right?
yeah. Well, I
And you
guess,
could get the athletic in if you thought that was
then at the second piece where it says dogs must be leashed at all times otherwise, it's a little confusing. Because it's like, they're not allowed, but otherwise,
They have to be leashed.
yeah.
Shouldn't be.
So what does that mean? So.
Maybe just take out the otherwise.
Well, I just want to be clear that if a ball game isn't happening, I don't want to see, I don't want it to, the understanding to be if a ball game isn't happening, then the athletic field has become the dog field.
Dog park.
Because,
So instead of otherwise, just at all times, period. Without,
right, dogs must be leashed at
at all
all
times,
times.
period.
I think the concern is the use of the dog in the field, which is school property, or being used for school property. It's not whether it's leashed or not, it's what the dog is doing there.
Yeah. I guess I just want to be clear, like, we have signs up on our property. So like, if there's not a game at Terranovich Field, that doesn't mean that that property is open for you to come run your dogs on the property.
Make deposits.
And the way this reads, that's kind of how it reads. It's like, they're not allowed while there's a school event.
So would it make sense to put unless posted otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're realizing that at least on our schools, people are going to be there on off-school hours with animals. And we're not saying we don't want to allow that, but if you bring a dog, would you please keep it on a leash?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I would say like in all of our communities, that's the law. There's an ordinance in place that we have leash laws in.
Including Pulteney?
You don't have a leash law in Pulteney?
I think we do.
Oh, you just mean the leash, not allowing them, because I think during our discussion in the policy committee, they were talking about there was a nice trail behind the school,
Oh, yeah.
so about not letting them at all.
No, and so I guess that was the other question, like, that had come up before, and maybe there should be something about, like, dogs must be leashed while they traverse school property to reach municipal trails or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm slightly perplexed why we're so interested in having dogs on school property.
Just asking for a liability issue at minimum, because
Yeah.
if the dog is there because you've allowed it to be there, then you take the responsibility, even though the owner owns the dog, you still are going to be in the lawsuit. If you prohibit the animal from being there, then you put all the responsibility on the owner. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Why would you want to accept responsibility for a dog that may, like Linda, and not like me, it's hard to understand, but it could happen. You don't want the dogs there on the property for liability, period. And even if, let's say, in West Rutland, kids were playing on off hours on the activity stuff outside, and somebody was walking their dog and it wasn't on a leash, or it was on a leash and came up and for some reason didn't like that child and bit them, who's going to be responsible for that? Okay? If you prohibit the dog, except for service dogs, on the property, then you use the court to transfer the liability to the owner of the dog, not to the school district.
Well, you're also talking about posting then all the properties. Because could you have a policy, somewhere that's not going to tell the general public that they can't bring their dog across your property?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the fact that, we changed this, that dogs are not allowed, on there, that means that that's the direction that the committee went, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I know we could talk about, hypotheticals for quite a while. Maybe it would be good to get some insight on legal counsel on some wording for something like this too.
It's very gray. It really is. I know I've spoken with Chris about this a few times, and
Okay.
it really, there's really no one clear cut, response for this. I mean, it really is, because I mean, some SUs will say no dogs on athletic fields at all times, because they don't want, say Pulteney, they don't want the football field being like a dog run. They have to, maintain that, and so they're, like the softball field, it's just, there are certain restrictions, others just a blankets, the liability, no dogs at all times, and I think, others, like I said, there are concessions, so it depends on.
Well, I mean, specifically, kind of like what Mike was talking about, that liability piece, if there's no policy, if there's a policy that doesn't specifically say, is the district liable in any way, So, I mean, I don't want to get too much into wordsmithing on policies, but,
There's the issue of negligence. And I think that's when I spoke with Chris around negligence, it goes back to even like a playground. I mean, most schools, I understand that the school playground is a community playground, but at the same time is if a student gets hurt, say they're going down the slide or they fall off and they break their arm, we do live in a litigious society.
Sure.
And that's just the reality of where we live in. But the question really is, do schools have to post a sign, say, please stay off school grounds, knowing full well that that's not going to stop.
Right.
But at the same time, if someone then chooses to enter and then go down the slide, hurt themselves, well, it's like, well, we did say, please stay off. So, I mean, this is, I think that I've been discussing this or seen this discussed for over 30 years with no right or wrong answer. It really is just more around, district response and community response. And I think like I said, just people see some of our schools, our fields as, well, that's our park.
Yeah.
And others see it as, well, that's our athletic field and that's where we play varsity sports. And last thing was you show up on for a football game and there's dogs that left a mess all over the field. It's not a good look. Or there are health concerns around that as well. As you're playing a game and you have right.
Amanda?
So.
I know it's not ideal to have individual policies for our schools, but I feel like this is one that we might have to. Like in Wells, I don't think that we can say we can't have dogs at our outside events because we don't own the property that we're playing games on. We have the playground and that's it. We don't play sports on the playground or the parking lot. So I think individually for our schools, maybe this is a policy that we need to put in our handbooks and post signs on a local board level rather than trying to handle it as an SU. Possibly that's the solution. I don't know.
So Amanda, I do believe the policy committee addressed that when they talk about on school grounds, because there was a situation they discussed at, say, Proctor, where if they play at the youth league fields, whether or not we have authority to really to say what occurs on that. And so I think that's why I said on school grounds during school events. So if, say, at Wells, if you're playing, at a Wells Village facility, then that would be under their purview, not ours. And I think that's why they try to clarify that in this committee, correct?
Yeah.
And that's fun. I don't have any issue with that. I mean, we play on town property for a game and it's posted too, no dogs.
The thing though is if you have a SU-wide policy of this, then if you're in the court and they pull it up, the superintendent can say, our policy is this and this is what we've maintained. We cannot be there posting when people come out and do something that is against that policy. So at least it gives us a fighting chance.
Yeah. I think it would read better if it says dogs must be leashed at all times and take out the otherwise. I think that's awkward.
I think that implies though that they can come. That's the problem, in my view.
Well, that's my problem with the first sentence and the second sentence.
Right.
So that they are kind of fighting with one another.
It shouldn't be implied that we're not going to have them, but if you come, they got to be on a leash. No, then they shouldn't be there.
Because our property is posted currently and has been posted prior to the merger, that we do not allow dogs at Taranovich.
So basically, you're saying take out, dogs must be leashed at all times, and take out the owner is responsible for proper cleanup of any animal in school grounds at any time, because you've already said you're not allowed outdoors on campus ground while school's in session or during school events,
Got it.
right?
Good.
Is that okay?
Well, it still opens up when school is not in session, or there's no school event there, then it doesn't give any direction about what we feel about dogs.
Why don't we just stick with animals are prohibited in school buildings and property?
Or we could do
Covers
that.
liability, and if people want to use the fields, they're going to use the fields.
Right, I mean,
Right.
it's not like.
Counterintuitive to say you can't have a dog, but if you do have a dog, put a leash on it.
Right.
And then
I
reference
mean-
pets later on. You say yes or no.
Right,
And then
it's
if
not
people-
like we're gonna police it, right? If
If
they're
people want
gonna
to use
do.
it, they use it. I mean, I don't think it's an active problem in any community. Maybe it is.
Well, it is. People like to bring their dogs to soccer games for some reason. And, and it's taken us a number of years to try to quell that at Terranova Field or at other, I mean, you know, it's like, we have signs that say no tobacco or no smoking or things like that. We don't say there's no tobacco and no smoking when school isn't in session or when school events aren't happening. The policy says there's no smoking on school property. That's what it says.
So just say pet dogs are not allowed outdoors on campus grounds, period,
I'm happy with that.
and take everything out.
I would be happy with that.
Is that anything that anybody would be happy with?
Well, what if we wanted to allow them
Right.
on our school grounds?
Part of being a collective.
I don't know. Those are my thoughts, but I mean, we don't have to sit here all night over it, so.
You want to take it back?
I was curious, instead
Well,
of,
I mean,
I was-
I'd say the GRSCU's recommendation of the policy level is to prohibit animals from school properties unless the local district decides otherwise.
No,
Then you
because we're
guys-
still liable for that, though. See, that's the problem, is you may say you want to have animals there, but still in the end, the liability would come back to us.
I'm not that concerned about liability.
Well, some of the
We've
lawsuits,
been in school for a long time here,
you
and
can get a couple $1 million for spilling hot coffee in your lap, because you know
I can
it's
do that
hot.
with or without a policy, too.
Right,
I can be
that's what I'm
walking by
saying.
I can be walking by the school.
Exactly, so you want to
With a
give.
dog on a leash, my dog sees a fish or cat, runs in there, mows someone over. My lawyer says, let's go after the deep pockets. No policy prohibits someone from being litigious.
That's right.
I think we're covering ourselves as much as we can, and if local levels don't have issues, they should be able to take that up at their local level. Carve it out in their own policy. I mean, our insurance policy is covering individual properties as it is with different risk pools, so they can take it up that way and pay for it if they want.
But the local's not paying for the building, we pay for it through taxation.
I pay for stuff in Burlington, I have no control over
That's
their policy.
exactly right.
Gotta have some local control. It's not my basketball game.
That's what the merger was about.
So I kind of, agree, let's not dwell on it all night. I mean, if there's suggested language, just vote on it and move on. And if it moves on for a first read, then it'll go to local boards, and then there can be discussion at local boards, and then we can go from there.
Could it say something like, dogs are prohibited at posted school property? So if,
How about saying while school is in session or during school events, at other times and unless posted, dogs must be leashed at all times, and owners responsible for cleanup.
so if it's posted, if we posted our property, no dogs, then no dogs. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that reads well.
All right, say that again.
After it says school events, we would say at other times and unless posted, dogs must be leashed at all times, owner's responsible for cleanup.
Okay, at other times,
We're talking, when school is not in session.
Yeah.
And there isn't an event.
I just want you to repeat it, George.
Oh, okay. After it says school events, at other times, and unless posted, dogs must be leashed at all times. I'm not gonna put the otherwise in there. And then the rest the same, they're responsible for cleanup.
okay.
That sounds great. Thank you. All right, so the motion is on the floor to move on as second reads.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Before about the grammar? On policies, I think it's really important that we are moving on a policy for first or second read with the proper grammar if possible. When we were in policy committee, the placement of commas can be really important, so that's why I wanted to go through that tonight with the group. And I didn't have it written down, so I apologize. I didn't print out any copies, or I would have handed it to you, but I do hear what you're saying about grammar otherwise, but for,
Right, when you submit it, don't you review it before it gets submitted to us?
that's what I mean. I think it got
That's
formatted.
what I mean, it needs to be
Yeah,
reviewed.
it usually is. That's why I was
before it comes to
surprised.
us. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
it
sometimes if
usually-
it comes from a different program to.
Yeah, I
to
think it got
Christine or something, then
unformatted,
yeah.
because we usually do that in policy committee.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Tina,
One,
Yep.
I'm an English teacher,
What?
so.
You're opposed? Motion passes by majority. All right,
That was for all first read?
yeah,
So, who made that motion?
Linda.
You ever read that?
Okay, we're at our second
My
general
book, he said
public
that.
comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak from the public to an issue before the board? Hearing none. Our next meeting is March 19th. Hopefully, we all come with good news and budgets are passed.
March 19th, yeah.
All right, and so we do need an executive session, so a motion would be in order
read it,
to move into executive session at 7:15 for negotiations and contracts.
I'll make that motion.
Favorite
Mike,
professor in college.
any discussion?
Business.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we will take a 5-minute break here while Pig TV cleans up, and then we will move in.
She gave me that.